Hello, this is Eric from Bay Area Hang Gliding. Once again, reading a ground school article. The last one about ground effect, the wind gradient. People should have listened to because I administered the test and there were some answers in that article. So this is an article by Dennis Pagen. It was in 1996. It's landing setup variations. Pilots of powerless aircraft such as sailplanes, hang gliders, and paragliders are required by natural law to land eventually and are normally afforded only one chance to get it right. For that reason, we have developed systems and procedures to help us control our energy and position in three-dimensional space. The familiar aircraft and figure-8 approaches are two such procedures. The aircraft approach, consisting of downwind, base, and final legs, in particular, is well suited for high-performance hang glider landings. This approach technique has been around in its present form since Eddie Rickenbacker rode the winds, but now a variation on the rectangular groove has appeared. New technology has always provided an impetus for examining our customary practices. In this case, the use of sensitive mapping GPS units in sailplanes has allowed an examination of the landing patterns of top pilots. A consistent variation in the standard aircraft approach was discovered, even among those pilots who fly commercial aircraft and strictly adhere to the standard approach in their workday flying. The variation has been refined and adopted by the British Sailplane Association and is now being touted for U.S. pilots. It makes such sense that we feel it should be explored by hang glider pilots as well. Perhaps it will become part of our formal instruction. It is in my school. The standard aircraft approach is shown in Figure 1. With the aircraft approach, after losing altitude in a staging area, the pilot enters the pattern at the initiation point A, then flies a downwind leg, base leg, and final leg. The turns at B and C are normally 90-degree turns, but may be varied to alter the base leg in order to adjust for height or wind differences. The two main problems with the standard approach are that we lose visual contact with the target from point D to point B, shaded, unless we seriously crane and strain our necks. In addition, in strong winds, it is difficult to judge the place to turn at B so that we don't get caught short on final in a headwind. For this reason, we recommend a figure-8 approach in ground winds over 15 miles per hour. The variation approach, as shown in Figure 2, helps alleviate these problems. In this case, the pilot makes a turn of about 45 degrees at F, just right there, which is well before the normal turn that was B on the other one. Then another 45-degree turn is performed at G, and finally a 90 at H lines up the final leg. That's the other one. Once again, very square. And then this is the new gliding approach, is what he calls it. This is what I teach at Ed 11 because, as he says, once you turn on F, between F and G, F would be somewhere near the 150, G would be somewhere near the dog park, or pointing towards the dog park. H, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll turn even high here, come back this way, and then come in like this, because I notice a lot of my students are doing that in the videos and really hitting the spots pretty much every time. So this solves the first problem because the amount of time spent going away from the target is lessened and confined to the stretch where the angle back to the target is not so great. So yeah, once you're getting past it, you can still look across. So when you start losing being able to look back at your target, just start a gentle turn. The second problem is alleviated because the turn at F and G and the diagonal let you drift across the wind with respect, lets you assess your wind drift with respect to the target more readily. In my recent practice with this variation on the aircraft approach, I found that I prefer to start the downwind leg a bit higher and further to the side of my field in order to perform a reasonable diagonal leg. Otherwise, the 245-degree turns ends up being a large continuous curve, which I do. This brings up the only possible objection I can see to the variation approach. An extra turn is required, 3 instead of 2. However, since the turns are of a 45-degree heading change, they can be performed in short order and are less susceptible to be altered by sudden turbulence. When I first read a description of this approach variation in Soaring magazine, it made sense to me. If this variation is valuable in hang gliding, we'll know after some experimentation and discussion. In that case, instructors may wish to incorporate it into their programs. All we need to do then is to adopt new terminology to aid communication. In the absence of anything else, I propose labeling the legs as downwind, diagonal, base, and final. In addition, to distinguish the approach from the traditional powered aircraft approach, I suggest that we call this the gliding approach. Try and see if it helps put you in your place. So, I have all these maps. So I have some of the printed up approaches, as I was talking about on the west approach. It does become a kind of a continual loop. Instead of 245s and then a turn on a final. And as I was saying, a lot of times to land in the spot, the hang 4 spot, what I'll do is come over here all the way by the dog park and then still leave enough room to do some turns in here to come into this spot. The south approach, basically you're on a base the whole way across, so you're always able to see your target, which would be here. You can see my alternate approach, which is the dashed line, is where it turns into more of a curve. If you were more experienced, you'd fly over the road. This is a map for my students, and I want to keep them away from fences and roads, so I have them, if they're going to make it to the road, do almost a 180-degree turn, or you could just connect up to this line if you faded back and you can pull in for speed to get there. So this is once again a curve, but then you can also create an extra base, which what I was talking about and he was talking about. Just kind of the same thing. You could have a 45 if you're coming in on the approach here instead of from this direction if you're coming from this side. Just gives you more options and lets you be able to see where you're going to land better. That's always a good thing when you're flying an approach, is being able to always see where you're going to land. And I'll focus on where I want to enter into a ground effect as much or more than where I'm actually trying to end up, because that's where I'm going to meet the ground for my round out. And then depending on how much speed I have, what my expected round out will be to end up on my spot. If you go to my eHang Glide channel, I've got several Lakeview spot landing contests, and you'll see me do a very curving approach and leaving myself to make sure you make it there. Leaving yourself enough options. Oh, okay, I'm too high. Get rid of it with a little turn, little diving turns. Come in a little crosswind. Okay, that's it for this one. Thanks everyone. Bye.